Hey, greetings, everyone. Welcome to the Court Views podcast, where rule IQ and elite skill meet. I'm Sony from Ref Masters, and I'm really excited about today's session. We've got some great guests. As always, we have Milton from MDW Basketball. We have Chip from Deep Dive Ref and also a statistician for the Orlando Magic. And we've got a great new guest here today, Linnae Harper, big time pro, multiple leagues, including the WNBA. Really, really excited to have you here. And we were just talking before coming on live here. Linnae, you were saying that you've thought in the past about maybe trying officiating.
Yeah, when I was in college, I was like, you know what? When my time is up, playing ball, I feel like being a ref wouldn't be so bad. It's still, close to the game, being connected to the players, just the atmosphere. I just think it's a great niche. So it's definitely always been on the back of my mind.
Well, if you ask anybody, any of the refs in this chat right now or on this meeting, one of the biggest reasons why they officiate basketball is the camaraderie, but it's also being able to stay close to the game. So a lot of us are former players, maybe not to the level that you have been as a player, but players make excellent officials. And we always try to recruit players, but especially, man, you've seen a few players in the NBA make the jump, like just two or three that made the jump. I know Leon Wood is the OG, man. Like he's been doing it for a while. And he was a player back in the day. But listen, if I get to say one thing, I'm like, come join our side someday, Linnae. When your playing days are over, come join our side. The dark, come to the dark side.
Come to the dark side.
Dark side.
Yes.
Yeah, we've been talking to Milton about that as well, but he has not budged. He
will not. I've been working him for years, and he will not budge. He's like, I'm no ref, man.
That's not my thing.
Oh, I'm sure it's in you.
All right, so let's do this, everyone. Let's get into some basketball. We've got a lot of great plays, and for those of you that are joining us in this live session, we want to hear from you as always. Give us your comments. Give us your questions. We'll take them in real time as they come. Let's take a look at this first play. Because we've got Linnae here, we've got a few WNBA and women's basketball related plays, and we're thick in the WNBA playoffs, so it's really great timing. We look at a lot of footwork stuff, but let's start actually someplace else. Let's start at a hard foul. And this comes up a lot. Players are asking questions. Referees at all levels have questions because I think the way that we apply what a flagrant foul is kind of evolved over time. And I want to play this recent foul, elbow to the face. These are the types of plays that people argue about all the time. And for those of us here in our studio audience, want to hear from you as well. Is this a flagrant foul or not? But right off the bat, Linnae, when I watch the WNBA, and I think a lot of folks this year are new to the WNBA, right? And I think they're not necessarily acclimated to the physicality of the game in the WNBA, right? So talk to us a little bit about that.
Oh, yeah. I mean, it's the best players, in the world, so the game is very competitive. It's going to be intense. It's going to be a lot of physical contact. And I think this play is so interesting because it honestly can go two separate ways. For me looking at it, and I've been watching it so closely for every replay, I honestly don't think it's a flagrant foul. But again, it can also go that way. I think it depends on where you are stationed on the court, your view, and what you think it is. But I just think this will be a common foul on New York.
Can I ask Linnae a question on that one? Because that's an interesting point. So, like, if you were Sabrina on this play, if you were the defender, would you be expecting a flagrant one, or would you be asking for one?
I think if I'm Sabrina and I'm in the game, I'm gonna ask for a flagrant.
Yeah,
because she did get hit in the mouth. But watching it from another angle, right before Tiffany made the pivot, Sabrina was already like gathered in her personal space.
Okay.
Her outer right knee is. It was already like she didn't have any type of space for movement. So I think that's kind of where her swinging over to pivot and she got hit in the mouth is where it appears to be a flagrant.
I love getting the player's perspective on this because it helps us in our communication as refs with players, be able to strip down kind of what their concerns are on certain plays, like you mentioned, in her space type thing. So now if you bring that up, then as a ref, I'm able to kind of come back and give my response to you on what did the defender do wrong, and by rule, so in my opinion, the defender is in legal position on this play, and has not entered the cylinder of the offensive player, has not entered her actual space, but I love hearing the player's perspective on that, because I can totally understand why you would feel that way, especially, let's say you were the offensive player on this and you got called for the foul. She's in my space. What am I supposed to do?
Yeah.
So then I'm able to respond with something that James, or even last week or last couple weeks ago, Mark would say. We looked at an elbow play. Is when you look at the rip through, are the elbows more vertical or more horizontal in their movement? So they start to go up at first, but then they rip across, and that's where the contact happens to the face. And because it's across, that's why this should be a flagrant one. I don't know if it was in this game.
So I think it was,
but it should be a flagrant one in the NBA and the WNBA by rule, because just because there's contact to the head or neck area does not automatically mean that it's a flagrant foul. And you know that, Linnae, from playing, you've probably heard that explanation a few times too. It doesn't automatically mean, but that's one thing this day and age, like in the NBA or WNBA, if you see hard contact to the head or neck area with an elbow that's a rip across like that, I would venture to say 9 times out of 10, like, you'd be super lucky if it's not upgraded to a flagrant one by rule.
Yeah.
Especially because they have to go to the replay monitor to look at it. And when they go back there and look at it, they're able to dissect whether those elbows are moving more vertically or more horizontally across. And when you see that crossing movement and the elbow catch the face, and that's at any level, really, men's and women's college, they've got different terms for it, but in men's college, that would be a flagrant one. Foul, and then in high school it would be intentional foul on the offensive player. So I would look for an upgraded foul on this play to a flagrant one in this league. But understanding the player perspective is going to help us in our communication, because you could probably agree, Linnae, if you probably enjoy the refs more who are able to concisely communicate with you about why they called what they called in a respectful manner.
Yeah. I think my question is, to your point, is that if that is going to be upgraded to a flagrant foul, then as an offensive player, how do we create space without it being a foul? I mean, because I don't know if you could pause it right there,
Yeah.
but like at that, right before the pivot, Sabrina was like, so right there, how can we create space? Because we can't dribble. And even her hands, Sabrina's hands aren't straight out.
Yep.
So right there, her hands are already attached to her arms. Her lower body is already connected. So Tiffany doesn't really have anywhere to go.
Right. And that's it.
I would say lower. I would say when she comes to this position, instead of having the ball above her head, keep it more so at her torso and rip it through that way. And that'll avoid a lot of that and give you a little bit more space.
And and I know that may be tough, Linnae, too, because I agree with Milt on this, but because there is such small space there, if you try to rip across, your elbow's probably going to go into her torso, and then it could cause you to fumble the ball. You're always wanting to try to protect the ball when you're ripping through. So I get that. My simple answer would be, the short answer would be, there are some times where you're not able to create space. If the defender's in a legal guarding position in your path, which Sabrina is in Tiffany's path in this play, then there's only so much that you can do. So sometimes the being able to create space has to take a back seat to not picking up a foul because of the position of the defender. And since the defender is in legal guarding position directly in her path, that limits what she's able to do without causing illegal contact. Does that make sense?
Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm.
I literally just went through this numerous times playing yesterday.
Really?
And I just ripped lower and use my shoulders to create a little bit of space.
But sometimes when you're in the game, you're not thinking, it's just you caught the ball and your first instinct is to just rip. And then as you're turning, it's like she's right there. Because I don't think Tiffany is being intentional. but
Yeah.
it's just more so like she doesn't have anywhere to go, you know?
For
Yeah,
me,
and that's
too, I don't naturally rip above my head either. So that could be something different for me.
and that brings
Yeah.
up another point too. And Linnae, I'd love to get your opinion on this. Is I know that there's some coaches out. I can't say a lot, but I know there's some coaches that have taught when you're ripping across, like to have your like arms a little bit more elevated or whatever, or to protect the ball. Like I think that shouldn't be taught, and I'm not sure it is like on a large scale, but like I just think it's dangerous from a referee perspective, and especially for the defender. It's super dangerous when a player rips across like that with their elbows showing. And you see it a lot in the NBA game too, like on fast breaks, and there's a defender in front where they're trying to rip across to do the euro. Like they have those elbows at face level, and I'd love to see that out of the game, but I also don't want to penalize offensive players for trying to make a good move that are not intentionally doing it, which is another point. No player, players rarely actually commit a foul on
I was
purpose.
going to say rarely, maybe not
Yeah,
ever.
rarely do they commit a foul on purpose. Like it's usually an accident. It's
Yeah.
not something they intend to do. It's just it's unless it's flagrant or stuff like that, they usually don't. They don't mean to commit a foul, but that's something that's a little dangerous in my opinion. But I could definitely support a flagrant one if that's what they call on this play. I definitely could.
Yeah.
Yeah, and Christopher Snyder makes a comment here about freedom of movement, and really well said there too, I think.
Very good.
But the challenge I have, and I won't speak as a player, but I'll speak as I'll say ignorant fan perspective. Some of a concept that you'll hear talked about a lot in the media and amongst fans is whether this is a basketball move. I don't know if that's part of the rule book language, right? But like as fans, as spectators, that's what we say. And when I look at this, that's the challenge I have is it kind of looks like a basketball move, right? It doesn't really look like she's putting a whole lot different to it. Now I get your points there about the rip through could come lower, or you talked about the rip through vertical versus horizontal, so that's pretty interesting. I also wonder though, Chip, is there any difference here if, well, two things. One is she catches her with the off elbow, with the right elbow as she's coming up. Would it be any different in your view if the left elbow right there actually caught her a little earlier, or is it just elbow to the face? She's in legal guarding position. It's a flagrant.
Well, you remember that play we looked at a couple of weeks ago? Both elbows caught that defender in the face. I think that I wouldn't go as far as to say on this one that it's a non-basketball play, even though that is one of the criteria for a flagrant foul in the WNBA and NBA is whether it's a non-basketball move. I would say this is a basketball move, even though the elbows are a little high.
Yeah.
I think that whether you catch if you catch with the first elbow, I don't think it makes much of a difference if the other criteria are still there. This is hard contact to the head or neck area, and the swinging of the elbows, across more than vertical, is what we're looking for, or what they're looking for on that type of play.
Okay.
But that is a good point because, like a lot of people do talk about non-basketball moves versus basketball moves. I don't think so. I don't think there's anything intentional here, like Linnae was saying. And I also don't think that this is a non-basketball move per se. I just think the other criteria is there for this to be upgraded to a F1.
And these are the types of plays that I teach all the time as well, like just being patient when you come to a stop instead of feeling like, okay, I feel the pressure and I need to do this. Like if she would have just took her time and did the jump stop like she did and reverse pivoted, she would have been in open space. So it's just like just being a little bit more patient when you come to a stop like that. And you can avoid that whole situation.
Yeah. All right, let's look at another play. This has been floating around for a little while now on social media. And the first question here is, and I won't go to the analysis that Milton's put together, but is there 0 violations? Is there 1 violation? 2 violations? What's the ruling on how many violations are here? Because I think when we see this play, it looks odd. But then one thing that I've learned from Milton is just because it looks odd doesn't mean that it's a violation, right? So that's the thing that I keep coming back to. Oh, that looks like a violation there at the end there. That's the So what do you say to this, Chip?
All right. So on this play, Milton had a great breakdown on this play, and there's a lot of misunderstanding about that initial touch. That initial touch and deflection of the ball away from that pass, the deflection of the pass right there is not, even that second touch is not considered a controlled dribble. So right there is her first gather. Like that's the first time she's gathered the ball, and she gathers with her left foot on the floor. That's her zero step, as you can see on the screen. Takes that right step for step one, and we know by NBA and WNBA rule that a progressing player that gathers the ball, whether it be a loose ball, a pass that they catch, or whatever, a player that gathers that ball with one foot on the floor that's the zero step, the gather step. You're allowed one step as a progressing player prior to releasing the ball to start your dribble. So as long as she releases that ball to start her dribble before her second step touches, which in this case would be her left, then that's a legal start to the dribble. And in this case, it was a legal start to the dribble. And then as you move the tape, you're going to see her gather the ball here. Oops. As she changes hands. That's one of the ways the dribble ends. We discussed that a couple of weeks ago. Touching the ball more than once or whatever, that ends the dribble. So when she changes hands, that's the gather. And then she puts the ball back down again to start another dribble. And that's where the double dribble violation comes in.
Got it. Yeah, I've been seeing a lot of these plays where I think the thing people overlook sometimes is what is considered traveling at the beginning of a dribble when a dribble is initiated. And I think sometimes we count things as traveling when they're not, or sometimes we miss travels that happen right at the initiation of a dribble. Linnae, as a pro, as someone that's been playing basketball for a very long time, do you feel like, what's your perspective been on how the attitude towards footwork related violations like traveling and carry, do you feel like it's kind of evolves in terms of the way that it's interpreted, or do you feel like it actually hasn't really changed much?
I don't think it has changed much for women's professional basketball. I think for the NBA, it's been very clear and evident that, being able to take X amount of steps or dribbles, it has been, okay with. It's been a pass. One thing that I can say, it's a challenge when, as a WNBA player, you play 4 to 5 months in the States and they have their own rules. But then you go to Europe and you play international basketball, it's a totally different ball game. So I can say it's an adjustment. Like when you're overseas, you just can't catch and just go. It's a travel. I got caught so many travels there because it's legal here, but it's not legal there. With this play, I agree with Chip. I think the first right there, that's legal. She didn't have it. She gathered it, but now that is clearly a double dribble. My question is, and this, I was laughing because I wanted to know what was the ref looking at, because if you're watching the play, the ref is right there. I mean, right. Just focused. And she double dribbled. Like, it was very clear. Maybe he blinked in that moment. I'll tell you
exactly why, Linnae, because I actually broke this play down months ago.
Yeah.
I broke this play down months ago on Twitter, on my Twitter profile. And so, actually, could you go back to that play one more time, Sony? Sure. Can you pause it right here? Yep. See where the ref's looking? Hang on. A little bit forward. Right there.
Oh, he's looking back.
You know why? Because this is a fast. Yes, perfect. Yeah. So what we've been trained to do is if we are now the new lead in transition, and it's an open fast break layup, the chances that somebody actually violates a rule, the offensive player, like the dribbler, or like whether they double dribble or travel, is much less than a possible defender coming up behind them. So we want to go ahead and prepare for what's to come. So he would have not anticipated her gathering the ball again and then dribbling again here, because that usually doesn't happen.
The challenge that asks you as a ref, it's like, I definitely agree. Like, you have to see who's behind if they're going to make a challenge at that play. But right here, no one is near her. Right. I know it's somebody, we can't see it because it's blocked off, but no one is near her. I feel like at that point, I would look back if she's really in close proximity.
Yeah.
But she's not even like that close.
Right.
So, I mean,
Right.
I would be looking at the player with the ball.
Yep. And
Now,
that's a
if the
great
player got,
point.
yeah.
Yeah, well, that's a
Hmm.
great point. And so there's another camera angle of this where Milton and I have looked at it a couple months ago. If you remember this, Milt, a few months back,
Mm-hmm.
it's the widescreen or whatever. It's not like the IG, like whatever. And so what we call this is in refereeing is like stealing a peek. So all he did was steal a peek. It was just at a really bad moment. So as soon as he stole that peek, he looked immediately back and she had already switched hands and he couldn't tell that she had switched from left to right. So he thought that she just continued her dribble with her right hand instead of her left. So it's just still a peek back, just so we're prepared for if anything could happen. Because he didn't, if you look him at the start of the clip, he didn't steal a peek back right when she tapped the ball because he has to officiate whether or not the start of her dribble is legal. After she started her initial dribble right here, then, and he saw it was legal, then that's when he stole his peek back to see if there was a defender that could potentially catch her in a trailing position. And once he saw that that couldn't happen, it was an immediate back. But in officiating, that split second can make all the difference, and it did on this play. So I'm not, and this official wouldn't excuse their no call on this play either because you got to get this. It's super obvious. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But that is something from an officiating perspective I can add to the conversation is there's been times where I've got caught with my pants down, where I've stolen a peek back and done all the things I've been trained to do in transition and missed something that happened. So it happens
Because
from
what
time
if
to
this
time.
is like game 7 of the WNBA finals?
Exactly.
And
Oh my
it's
God.
30 seconds left in the game.
Yep.
And
Exactly.
this is the play. I mean, I think like, but I understand.
No, but
I
you're
think
right
it's
on that because maybe that's one of those things we trust the slot official on, if we're lead,
Mhm.
Based on, we know that when the ball was tapped away, there wasn't any defenders in close proximity right when it was tapped away. So let's
Mhm.
just focus all of our attention as new lead on the dribbler and trust our slot official on that side to be able to pick up anything on the backside, that could catch us off guard. And then that's a way we could get this one right because there's no doubt in my mind, if that lead was staring at that the whole time, at Angel Reese the whole time, a double dribble would have been called for sure.
Yeah.
And also too, like when you
Okay.
spoke about the rules from NBA versus FIBA, I'm not exactly sure when the WNBA rules changed and became the same traveling rule as the NBA, but FIBA has the same traveling rule. It's just enforced differently.
Yeah, it's definitely enforced differently. They're a lot
Yeah.
more strict in FIBA for sure on traveling violations.
Yeah.
But the
It's a
rules are the
lot.
same.
Yeah. It's a
Yeah.
lot you can't do. That first, like, just jab and go, like,
Yeah.
you can't. It's not even but here it's never really called
It's
at all.
technically a travel though.
Oh no, I agree. I'm just
But
saying from the landscape of basketball it's never being called.
yeah.
And that's even at college, D1, college, high school,
Yeah.
professional, I've never really seen it called in my entire career.
For sure. And it's sad that they do it like that, but then allow high school players to use gather steps or college players to use gather steps or call travels in high school when guys do step throughs. It's just like we're in a weird space right now. I don't understand that.
Wish there was universal traveling rules.
Yeah, man.
Yeah, wouldn't that be nice? So, Linnae, when you're on the other team here, what's your mode of communication towards the ref? Are you someone that talks to the refs a lot? Are you someone that kind of, just kind of does it here or there? What's your normal amount of communication with the referees?
For me, I really don't say much to referees unless it's just outrageous. I'm like, at this point, and I'm very fair too. It's like it could be my opponent, and I'm like, hey, you're calling very interesting calls on both ends. It's not just like about me. But if it's just outrageous, I'm just like, hey. But I think, and I can only speak for me. I don't know about any other athletes, but I think the frustration comes in where we're trying to speak to a referee and there's no like welcoming energy.
Yeah.
As women, we're way more emotional than men, when it comes to certain things. So I think that can also heighten the moment of the game. If like something happened and, hey, ref, I'm trying to talk to you. And it's like no eye contact. They're just walking away, just ignoring. So now it's like, all right, I might go intentionally foul the next play because,
Yeah.
you're ignoring me. So I'm going to make sure that you see me, or even it's been times where, um, in my entire career, I got one technical foul, right? And that was in Europe. And I tried to talk to the ref and I was like, can I get an explanation of, why? And they just walked away. And I'm like, hey, like I think it could be some type of form of communication. And I was an athlete. If I'm being very rude or disrespectful, obviously that's crossing the line, right? Especially if a referee is trying to communicate with me and I'm just not being, welcoming on my end, then the referee has all rights to make the best decision that they believe is right in that moment. But yeah, I think that's where I'm like, if I'm feeling like ignored,
Yeah.
I might just, I don't know.
Yeah, and you don't
Yeah.
strike me as a player that would complain often either. Like multiple times throughout a game. And a lot
Like
of time when
Milton?
yeah.
I didn't. I don't.
But that's one of the reasons why refs may come across as ignoring a player is if they've already done it multiple times. But you don't strike me as the kind of person that would do that. So if somebody ignored you, like right away, and that's something we talk as refs all the time about is how can we're there to do our job, right? But a big part of our job is communication piece. It's something I'm always trying to get better at,
Mhm.
And so we want to be able to give efficient and effective answers to questions that players and coaches have throughout the game, as long as it's not every play. But the best referees, in my opinion, are the ones that are able to do that while making you feel comfortable without, feeling like they're judgmental. They're just telling you what they saw. They're able to connect with you on a personal level sometimes as well. Again, we're there to be professionals and do our job, but part of being professional, in my opinion, is somebody that's asking for the first time or the second time about a play, affording them the respect to give them an answer,
Yeah.
and not ignore them.
Yeah. I think it comes down to respect a lot of times, and it doesn't feel like it's given, then it's gonna be given the other way.
Well,
Let's
and I
look
think
at
a lot of,
oh,
let me say one more thing about that,
yeah.
Sony, is like, I think something that's important for refs and players and coaches to remember is, for me personally, I've never changed somebody's mind outside of basketball by yelling at them. I've never made them more open to my side or my perspective by disrespecting them or challenging them all the time or this, that, and the other. Like, it usually comes from that mutual respect where we're able to have a back and forth conversation. We can agree to disagree at the end of the day, but
Right.
we're just trying to figure out the other person's perspective and be curious, and like trying to find out what that person is, and so that's the approach I always take is like, I'm not right all the time. So why would I pretend to be? And why would I not try to get some more perspective, player perspective or a coach perspective? If they're asking me a question, I want to know where they're coming from in order for me to be able to answer them effectively.
Yeah. Yeah, let's apply these concepts of respect and communication and look at another play. This one is from Milton from very recently, actually, on your MDW channel.
Yeah.
And Milton, what are the things here that you feel like? Uh, you've been talking about plays like this for years. What are the things that people get hung up on with things like this?
So they usually ignore the catch and try to call the finish an actual travel, but it was the exact opposite here.
Yeah, that's I think that's really well said, right?
Yeah.
Right here on the catch.
And one thing that can help us out on this catch is the cadence of the steps after the gather. It's a pat pat, you know what I mean? So pop pop, and then the dribble's released. So
Yeah.
that helps us be able to identify that he did indeed take more than one step, his allowable one step to start a dribble as a progressing player after he gathered the ball. So in that situation, it wouldn't be one of those videos that Milton does where he would say in real time, the gather's here, or in real time, it's easier to miss this one. Although that can be true, I can see this one not being called potentially to start the dribble in the NBA if maybe the angle's bad or they didn't see it properly or whatever. But being able to see that gather on the left foot and then the pat pat with the right left before the release of the dribble, is, in my opinion, one of those that would make it easier for me to call a travel in NBA and FIBA on this. And of course, high school and college, this is going to be an easy face-up travel at the start.
Yeah. I tried my hardest not to see it. I tried to speed the clip up and everything. It was just, it was no way.
Yeah.
From this angle, just me being able to see everything clearly, it was no way.
So you've got the gather on right, then the pat with left right, and then you see the dribble the ball out of his hand.
Yeah. Then the finishing part is easy, but people got hung up on the finishing part. It's just like,
I don't think that the initial catch and step is a travel. I think that's fine, but it's after he took his additional steps before then the finish is definitely a travel. But yeah, I don't think the initial catch is a travel.
Interesting. All right, so it's the opposite by rule, and that's what Milt broke down in his video. But that's what he was saying is like, a lot of people would think that the first part is the legal part and the second part is not.
Yeah.
So Milt, why don't you explain the finish?
So he catches. Oh man.
Hand comes under the ball. That's one of the definitions of it.
Under the ball for his gather on right there. Then took 2 legal steps after gather. Legal on NBA, WNBA, and FIBA. Yeah. In the beginning,
but a travel in the other leagues.
On FIBA, NBA, and WNBA. That's
so
all
you
levels.
Think
travel on every
level. You think the end is a travel?
No, the end is legal.
End is legal in FIBA and WNBA and NBA.
So he took the dribble here.
Yeah.
Ended his dribble. I think it was on his right foot. Yep. Ended dribble right here as his hand comes underneath the ball. Completely underneath. Gather.
Yep.
And then took his 2 legal steps after. That's step 1. Then that's step 2.
Yeah. It just looks weird because he covers so much ground after the ball last touches the ground. But that's another thing people get hung up on is like they think, how can you cover that, get all the way from the 3-point line, pretty much just inside the 3-point line without dribbling the ball? And so it must be a travel, but it's actually not. The only thing that people that want to split hairs a little bit would say that hand that was on the side of the ball, they consider that a gather, but by rule, that's not a gather. The ball has to be at rest in his hand, and his right foot is already on the floor when the ball's at rest in his hand. Then he takes left for 1, right for step 2, and then legally jumps to finish. So that's legal at NBA, WNBA, and FIBA, but a travel in college and high school in the States.
But it's interesting, the part about the catch. So you're saying it's a travel because that's his catch. He's caught the ball here.
Mm-hmm.
And then he takes 2 steps as a progressing player.
That back step he takes before releasing the ball. The ball has to be released. And we're saying he still has his hand on the ball when he takes that back step.
It's close. I could see in the NBA and WNBA them not calling that as far and using the splitting hairs as a thing. But when you look at the play at game speed, which is what I try to do first.
Same.
For me, I don't look in slow-mo at all when I'm watching game clips unless I want to see something in more detail about my positioning or this, that, and the other. But when I watch games at live speed, game speed, I feel the cadence of the pat with the right or the left right before I see that ball out of his hand. That's what may lead me to call it a travel at NBA or at those levels. Now it's obviously a travel in college and high school because if you injure dribble or if you catch the ball with 1 foot on the floor, like his right foot in this case, then when you step with your other foot as a progressing player, then that first foot that was on the ground is your pivot foot. So you're not allowed to lift it before releasing the dribble, and he clearly does that. But in high school, but in NBA, FIBA, and WNBA, it's close. But I think that pat occurs before the 2 steps after the gather occurs before the release of the dribble.
Yeah,
it's close. Yeah, it's really close.
It is. I could definitely see it not being called in the WNBA and the NBA. But that's one of those, Linnae, that I think may be called in FIBA.
Yeah. Oh, it will.
Even though it's not against the rules.
I mean, if I'm a ref. Regardless, I'm calling a travel after this initial gather. That's just me. That's just my personal opinion.
On the finish?
On the finish, yeah. I'm not a ref, so I know you all have different perspectives and you all are very knowledgeable and experts in that field. But just from me watching, I'm not calling that a travel, but I'm definitely calling the rest a travel. That's just me, though.
That's
just me.
And that's my pushback with athletes. We feel like only the refs should know the rules, but I believe that if you play the game and you want to play the game at the highest level and you want to be the best version of yourself, like what game do you go to? What type of any activity do you do without knowing the rules first? So I don't
I
understand.
mean, that's like if you can get away with it, why wouldn't you do it, right? That's almost like if a coach is calling a timeout and they know they don't have any timeouts left, but the referee didn't
Right.
catch it. You think they're going to be like, oh, wait, the rule says, I don't have any more timeouts. So the
Right.
opposing team gets, a technical shot in this fourth quarter. You're going to take what you can get. That's the nature of,
But I feel like you can abuse it more once you actually know and you
know the rule, yeah. And like he did on this play.
You understand a bunch of different factors that go into it, then you can know what to actually get away with.
But I think that's what makes pro athletes. Like, I know it's things that I've done, and I do it because I know I can get away with it. But because of my level of IQ, I know what's right from wrong. I know what I can and can't do. And if I can get away with something, like, I'll do it. Now, it's not necessarily intentional.
Right.
I'm not out here thinking like, oh, let me take, a gather 3 steps because they're not going to call it. It's more so like if it happens, and in my mind, plenty of times I made a mistake and I was like, oh, I traveled, but they didn't call it, right? It's the nature of the game. You keep it pushing.
Yeah.
I wonder if there's, Linnae, it'd be interesting to see in retrospect, which we'd never be able to find out. But of those times where you thought you got away with the travel, it'd be interesting to know how many of those were actually legal plays that were no called correctly.
Right.
Because here's the thing: is like obviously as refs, we study the rules way more than any coach or player does. You know what I mean? So like, it's so that when we see these, and we review film for that same reason, is so that when we see these type things in a game, we're able to realize and recall right away that that's a legal play. So I there's not a doubt in my mind that finish would, especially in the NBA, would not be called a travel because it's in my opinion, it's an easy 0-1-2, gather 1-2.
In the NBA.
And so like, and they don't split hairs on the gather right there. So like, they're going to make sure that ball is gathered in that one hand. And by that time, it's the right foot is already on the floor. That one's going to be definitely not called in the NBA. But that, I wonder if, a player did that in the NBA, would they think that they got away with the travel? You know what I mean? Because you'll definitely see the other team on the bench going like that on a play like that. But when you get the L2M report, you see it the no call correct because it was a gather 1-2. So it'd be interesting to see that because even as a player, there's sometimes I thought there's no way I just got away with that. And turns out when I read the rules, like I was actually legal on that. But then there's other times where I'm like, there's no way I committed that foul or no way I committed that violation, only to find out that I actually did.
Like it was a time I double dribbled in the game and I was like, I visibly showed like, wow, I just doubled, but the ref didn't catch it. So I'm like, well, I'm going to keep going.
Keep going. You ain't going to stop and tell them here,
I'm not
take the ball.
stop and say, hey, according to the rule book, I doubled. Like, no, I'm not going to say anything. I'm going to keep playing.
I'm not repeating that, but what I am saying though is if you could take advantage of something that will actually give you an advantage, why would you not want to be educated on it?
That's true. That's true.
Yeah. Well, I think the other challenge here, we kind of talked about it before, is just that if you did this move at the college level or in NFHS, you're going to get called, right?
It's a travel, easy travel.
Yeah, it's a travel. Way. So it's like one of those things. And that's where I think people can get very dug in because they're like, they know for a fact it's a travel at the level that they're thinking about in their head. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that is kind of a confusing thing,
But that's a legal play in 95% of basketball in the world.
Yep, because FIBA is the rule set for most of the world.
Yeah.
But not my world, Milton. No,
that's right.
I hear you, dude. I hear you. Let's look at another one. This one from Indiana Fever game this season. And looked like there was a lot of pushback on this. And this looks kind of similar in concept, at least, to the end of the previous play, right?
Mm-hmm.
So this is our 0 step. 1, 2. But in real time, it looks like she's gallivanting around town.
Yep.
You know,
especially from that angle right there. From that angle right there, you could assume that, or one could assume that she's gathered the ball earlier than we were able to confirm it in real time from the other angle. So right here, like, here's the thing: if you pause and use slow-mo, she traveled in this clip.
Yeah.
But even with L2M reports in the NBA and stuff like that, they don't use, if they say it is not judged to be an incorrect decision by the official if you have to use enhanced video or slow motion or stuff like that, because we don't officiate the game in slow motion. So one of the things Milt talks about in his breakdowns all the time is in real time. Well, in real time for an official, we're looking between these two players right here because they're so close, but we're also trying to keep an eye on the gather and the feet, right? But also anticipating a potential collision, as the trailing defender comes up too. So there's a lot to watch here. By the time you're able to absolutely confirm that the gather has occurred, what Milt says in his clip is that left foot is already on the floor for the gather step or zero step. And then she takes 2 legal steps after that in NBA, FIBA, and WNBA rules. There's a part of me that when I watched this the first time at game speed, I was like, I think that might be a travel, because I thought she gathered the ball before that left foot was on the floor. So I'm going to be real with you. I could see this being called in certain situations, even in NBA or WNBA games. But I think that on this play, the official did not identify the gather until that left foot was on the floor, and that's why they allowed the 2 legal steps after that. What do y'all think, though?
I'd say with players moving this fast, I don't know, Chip. Especially in the NBA, that'll never be called, ever.
So on that replay angle again, boom, is where I have it. But I had it before that. But I mean, not in real time. I'm saying in real time when I'm watching multiple things like the trailing defender, the catch, and the feet. Yeah, that's 3 points that I've got to get my eyes to. That can be a little tough.
Yeah.
What do you think, Linnae?
I think honestly it can go either way, depending on the angle. In real time, it looks different than when it's in slow motion. But I definitely think this is a play where if a coach, I don't know the time, if they're able to, ask for a review, but I definitely think this is a moment that, if a coach can ask for a review play, they can look at it in slow motion and then really determine if it's a travel or not. But like you said, if referees are looking back, you mentioned the peep, these players are closer to her. So if I'm a ref and I'm peeping back at Camilla, then I might not see her footwork because I'm looking at her, which then eventually resulted in a foul. So I think that play, everything is just moving so fast, more players in one, area. It could go either way. But I definitely think it probably is travel.
That's a great point. And there is a lot to watch on this play. And so that's why I could totally understand how in real time, and even if this was somehow graded in an L2M report as a travel, a no call incorrect, I would be hard pressed to think that was right, because in real time, I can totally understand why this is not called, because in real time, I could see it as legal. The only thing I do have to say is so travels or no called travels or called travels are not a reviewable matter in the NBA or WNBA. So they wouldn't be able to challenge this with a coach's challenge. Only called fouls or anything like that. But violations that are uncalled, like travels or double dribbles or even called travels or double dribbles are not allowed to be reviewed. Maybe that'll change someday. I'm not sure. But
you see the fan at the end right there? The fan, she gets up at the ref. She's like, hey, clearly. Wait, are you not watching the same game?
Right. That was so funny. I saw it right. Is it on this angle?
Yeah, I think so. She's like, hey, that's the travel.
Funny. That's funny.
Well, and you know what? Listen, she may have a point, because guess what fans do? Fans, coaches, and players, what is the only thing they watch in a game? The ball.
Yeah, the ball. That's it.
And the ball handler. Yeah. Refs, we watch it all. We have to watch the defender. We have to watch the hands. Yeah. We got to watch the feet. So, people, sometimes coaches have a valid point, because I'm like, hey, I was looking between that matchup. You might have been just looking at the ball, so you might have seen it. And then there's other times where I'm like, Coach, I just called a charge, and you wanted a
Yeah.
block on that play, and I've got my eyes on that secondary defender 3 seconds before you even saw that defender come into frame. So, like,
Yeah.
I'm watching that defender to see if they're legal. They got plowed over. That's a charge.
But
Yeah.
Okay,
I'll say this to push back too. I'm sorry to be the villain today, but how many coaches and fans do you think know the actual rules? Not many.
Yeah, not many. That's true. Old villain Milt over here, man. You're coming out of the gate today, man.
Yeah, man. Somebody got to do it.
You gotta get that mustache, with the handlebar mustache.
handlebar mustache.
Get
I'm
your
the
villain
Joker
on.
today, man. I'm the Joker today. That's my favorite villain.
That's your favorite villain?
Now I'm going to challenge that.
What's up?
Yes.
I know you said, how many coaches, players, and fans really know the refs.
Mhm.
I mean, really know the
Rules. Yep.
rules.
Mhm.
How many referees have really played basketball to understand from a player's perspective?
That's a good point.
At a high level.
To understand
How
what
many refs? Just the game. Like, that's like if I wanted to go coach football right now. I don't know anything about football,
Mhm.
but I'm out here leading a lot of athletes
Yeah.
to this game, and I'm telling them, hey, this is the right way because this is the rule, but I've never played,
Right.
so I'm not able to. But that's just me, that's a challenge to say, like, you're right. Athletes, fans, they may not know the rules, but how many referees have really been able to say, like, I actually understand the
Yeah.
game from an athlete's perspective?
For
And
sure.
not just about travels, but it could be
Right,
from
yeah.
any
Yeah.
type of,
Yeah.
it could be from, like we talked about, communication,
Yeah. Yeah.
Like if I'm a former athlete, I know what it was like during my career to communicate with a referee.
Definitely.
And so if I make that transition to being a referee, I'm like, hey, I want to make sure I'm that ref where I am at least acknowledging certain situations or communicating. Like Chip said, I may not be able to get to everything if every possession you're asking for. I can't get to that, but I do understand the notion of, I understand it because I've been there before.
Yeah.
That was a great question, Linnae, because
Back
Yeah.
to Bill Milt. How many players understand it from the referee's perspective?
well,
I think we have open communication. And I say that because before every season in the league, we have our referee sessions, they come out, we look at different plays, we communicate about it. So I think there is a foundation of understanding. I just think that it has to, continue to grow as time goes on. But
I mean, like
it's
them
def-
seeing the floor, like the duties that they have, like the experience that they have. They have a totally different experience with basketball than we do.
yeah, absolutely. But I
that's
think
why I think that, yeah, go ahead.
it has to be the gap has to be bridged between referees and players because we have our own perspective, referees have their own perspectives, and we both have moments where we're right and wrong. So neither party is greater.
Yeah.
It's more so of like working together.
Definitely.
Yeah.
I
Your
think
point.
it starts with players and just people in general knowing the rules, though. If you know the rules, then you can go and have a conversation. But if you don't know the rules and you like, oh, this was this, but that's not a rule, then it's like, what type of conversation are we really
But
having?
it's okay to not know the rules, right? If you're an athlete, because coming from college to the pro level now, just a year ago, nobody was watching the WNBA. Now you have millions of followers, right? And so you have college players who are just trying to adjust from being college athletes to being pros with now having large groups of fans following them everywhere, having to deal with criticism, having to deal with all of that. So that's what a rookie is, right? You're coming to learn from a coach's perspective, learn the organization. And if it's in a game and an athlete does not know the rules, that's where a referee is to come in and educate and say, hey, well, this is why we're referees. We're here because we know the rules and we're going to teach it and explain it to the best of our ability in hopes that you can, be open with receiving that information to knowing like now, okay, this is not a part of the rule book. Now I know moving forward. Now, if I continue to do that while I am aware of the rules, then that's just on me. But it's okay if you don't know the rules. That's what referees are for, right? Because like you all said, you watch more games than probably any of us. So it's okay to educate, whoever on the rules, because you all are the experts, because, it's your job to referee the game.
Right. But
I
I
think
feel like, as a teacher of players and as a teacher of the game, I've never refereed and I probably never will. That's not what I do. I was a
Mhm.
player. I played professionally. I played in college. And now I teach young people how to reach the highest levels that they can reach. So for me, from a teaching perspective as well, helping them understand the rules better has in turn gave them competitive advantages that
Mhm.
they would
over
have never
players that don't.
had if they didn't understand the actual rules of the game and how they work. So I feel like, no, you won't know every nuance, and I don't know every nuance, and that's why I lean on officials. So yes, you do have to lean on officials, but at the same time too, you have to do your work. Just like we do our work on the court, we got to do our work off the court, just like we do our work, getting experience so we can get that IQ. I think having rule knowledge raises the IQ even more. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So
I,
I get
I
what you're saying though, but I
I
would
mean,
never
honestly, I think,
yeah,
that.
and I'll be completely honest, I probably don't even know all the rules.
Yeah,
You know what I'm saying? Like, and I've been playing at the
Yeah,
highest level that, like,
right.
there's
yeah,
no other level that you can go to outside of
That's
playing
right.
in the WNBA and then playing for Team USA, right?
right.
Yep.
Yep.
I don't know all the rules, FIBA and WNBA. I don't know.
Right. Right.
But I got here obviously because of talent, because of skill. Coaches that were able to help me, but also had referees. I'm still great friends with referees that were refereeing games when I was in elementary school. Like,
Wow.
it just all takes, it's a village, right? But like I
Yeah.
said, there is no greater, and I think that's one thing with basketball. I think there's like this huge gap between, like, well, I have this knowledge and I know, but
Mhm.
there's like, every coach is different, every style is different, every referee is different, and that's
Mhm.
okay.
Yeah.
The game is evolving. I can't
Yeah.
sit here and say, well, my way of teaching is the way because I did it, but the game is evolving.
Yep.
There
yeah,
might be another coach that has a different way of teaching, but it's more so about how can we collaborate together to make sure that the safety of the players and the referees and the coaches are consistent, and how are we continuing to educate each other, right?
Yeah.
While
Yep.
also conforming to the rules that are just mandated, which is NBA, WNBA, and FIBA.
Yeah, I think Jose's comment puts a bow on it for sure about what we just discussed. We all have to learn from each other. Like
Yeah.
I love the player perspective you brought up, Linnae. And I think from a philosophical standpoint, referees, like I said earlier, understanding player perspective more, like whether they've played the game in the past or they're asking questions of players to gain that player perspective. I think us all learning together from each other, like that helps with the communication standpoint for sure.
Yeah.
While players and coaches that take the time to learn and understand the rules at a higher level are going to have a better advantage over coaches and players that don't.
a million.
I think that's just a personal thing for them. Like if they want to try to give themselves as best a competitive advantage as they can get,
Yep.
then learn the rules because it'll help, like
Yep.
even more so. But then referees gaining that player perspective is really going to help with our communication and understanding the game, especially for those who didn't play at a high level,
Yeah, and I think
which,
you just answered Ryan's question.
oh,
He asks, how can an official gain credibility with high level players if the official hasn't played the game at a high level? I think it's exactly what you said, like just communication,
mhm.
building that relationship. I have relationships with coaches that during the game, they might have called a terrible call and I might feel some kind of way, but I have enough respect for that referee to know, like, hey, whatever call they made, obviously they did it with the best intentions, you know,
Yeah.
and I'll still be able to communicate in a respectful way versus like being disrespectful or being,
Yeah.
bashful, anything like that,
Yeah.
So,
Linnae, the point you made earlier too, just about your experience with the technical foul, and also about how how many referees really can understand the players, how it is to be a player at a high level, and
Mhm.
not a lot, obviously. But I think that's something where referees can gain a lot more, because I think sometimes the lack of communication that can come across as disrespectful, like that just comes from the referee not really like having that experience and understanding how the player is in that moment. Because also how players can be in the moment of battle too is like they can be a certain way, right?
Yeah.
And that can
It's very high.
shut down a referee or put them off, especially if they don't understand the context of like it's not personal. Like, this is how it is on the court. Like, Milton,
Right.
you've told me this before. Like, obviously, you're a really great guy, family guy, man of faith, etc. On the court,
Yeah, I'm a demon on the court.
you're a demon on the court, right?
Yeah.
It's different, right? Like Linnae, like you're obviously like such a pleasant, great, person to have a conversation with, hang out with. You seem just really easygoing, right? But on the court, you're a different Linnae, right?
Yeah.
And I think if you haven't had the experience of playing at that high of a level, you can't really relate to that. But hopefully that's part of what we're doing, having conversations like this, like really trying to bridge that gap.
Love it.
Yeah, absolutely. Perfectly said.
I want to look at one more play and then we'll call it a day. I've seen things like this before, and I'm guessing that this is legal. But I guess my question is, like, are there any limitations to doing things like this? What's the limit? Or is it just like, hey, it's a free for all, and I'm basically boxing you out? Is that what this is? I'm boxing the person out. Is there a level into which this becomes a foul?
I want to
Can I ask you a question, Chip?
Yeah.
As a ref, would you call a foul on Natasha Cloud? I'm just curious.
I'm not calling a foul. I'm not calling a foul on either player on this. If I was the WNBA ref in a WNBA game, this one, I'm by rule, and by feel, I'm not calling a foul on either player on this play. And I'll give you my explanation why here in a second, but I wanted to get your player perspective on this. From the standpoint of if you were the defender on this play. So we know that this is going to be a backcourt violation if she touches the ball, correct?
Mm-hmm.
We know the time's winding down. If you're that defender trying to get to the ball, give me your player perspective on this play. What do you think Thomas is doing wrong on this play, or illegal, or and it could be maybe not by rule, but what you feel as a player?
I wish I could see like the score.
I was going to say that earlier.
It's a good point.
That would definitely play a part. Like if this is
the end of the game,
and if this is third quarter and I'm Natasha, and I'm clearly fouling, and I'm the ref, I'm going to call a foul. I'm going to call a foul because she's clearly grabbing. I don't think Alyssa Thomas is doing anything wrong. It's just very similar to just, using the clock. It's actually very smart. Now, if it's the fourth quarter and like,
I think it is, isn't it? We can't tell on here, but I'm trying to remember this play, but I can't remember.
But if this is the fourth quarter and I'm Cloud and we're down, I'm actually going to go foul her closer up to right there because we need that time.
Yeah.
If we're down, we're down a point and it's 9 seconds left right here, I'm going to hurry up and foul to try to save those additional seconds.
Yeah. And obviously time and score if you're down.
Yeah. If it's time and score.
But also it could potentially be a backcourt. You may get the ball instead of fouling. So it's like,
right.
What do you want to do? Do you want to let it play out? But I think we can agree putting pressure earlier, it would have been a preferred method from a defensive standpoint.
Yeah, you just pick up earlier, especially if you're down.
Her to it. Yeah, just force her to pick that ball up earlier. And in that case, you have more space on the court too. Once it just crosses, so now you're not down in that corner with no way to get to the ball except going through her, right? Yeah. I'm glad you said from the Thomas perspective that what did she do wrong? I'm glad you said that. The definition of a screen in the NBA, WNBA, almost all levels, there's a different, variation of this, but it means the same thing. A screen is a legal action by a player that prevents or delays a opponent from reaching their desired position. That's exactly what she's doing on this play. It's a legal action. So here's the thing. That first one, if we can pause it on that first contact, Sony.
Yeah.
So right here, she's high IQ play. She's letting the clock run out. She sees the defender's coming. She steps there, but the defender also stops too. She's not really initiating contact. She's planning. Let's use our screening rules to adjudicate this play because this is essentially a screen. She's trying to screen her from reaching a desired position. She puts her foot out and puts her body in the path. Well, WNBA and NBA, there's nothing about being stationary in the screening rules. This and that. If you're in their path and not moving into them and initiating contact or causing contact, then you're legal. If you're legally blocking their path and you're standing in their path. That's what Thomas is doing here. She puts her body in between the defender and the ball. And also in the NBA and WNBA rules, Thomas is allowed to continue moving in the same direction and path of the opponent. So they're both trying to move into that same position. And so she doesn't have to be stationary. She can continue moving towards the ball to shield that ball or shield the defender from getting the ball. She just cannot move laterally or into the defender to cause illegal contact. Her first step towards her to block her out didn't bump her off her spot, did not clear her out, did not do any of that. It just absorbed the contact. She didn't cause the contact. So I love what you said about this play. I don't think she did anything wrong in shielding the player from getting the ball and blocking her. So use our screening principles. Now, if we look at the reason why a defensive foul was not called, this is where the feel of the game comes in for me. Okay. So here's the thing. The offensive team is clearly they've got the advantage here. They're trying to run out clock. So clearly they're winning, in my opinion. If this was the fourth quarter, they're clearly winning, trying to take up time. Or maybe that's not even the case. Maybe they're just trying to have that advantage, and let the ball roll out and not get a backcourt violation. Well, she doesn't really displace Thomas on this. Thomas is giving ground and just moving towards the ball. There's some bumps and stuff. And then the only thing I would have called a foul on is when she puts her arms around her and then pulls her. But by that time, the ball is already on the line. And the official's blowing the whistle for out of bounds. So I don't like to use the term path of least resistance on this, but as officials, there's certain times where we're presented with two options on a play. We can call two different things. We could call a foul on the defender here, or we can call the out of bounds. If I'm presented with that opportunity in a game, I'm calling out of bounds 100% of the time instead of the foul and putting a foul on a player.
So, Chip, if Thomas on this play ended up having to move laterally to block off the other player from the ball, then
we have a loose ball foul. Yeah, then we have a loose ball foul on Thomas. If she moved laterally to cut her off, didn't give time and distance, and there was contact, her initiating that contact by moving laterally or putting her shoulder back into her, then it would have been a loose ball foul on Thomas. Talking about high IQ play, the only way this could be even more high IQ is if Thomas would have touched the ball right before the ball went out of bounds. Here's the reason I say that, because in the WNBA and the NBA, since it's a backcourt violation, the resumption of play would have been back by the half-court line, one step into the backcourt, instead of being able to inbound the ball where it went out of bounds. Now, keep in mind, if this ball goes out of bounds on the sideline, which I don't think he had it go – well, I think he had it going out of bounds on the sideline here. Now it's a corner throw-in. So you're throwing in from the sideline because you got to – in the WNBA and NBA, you have to inbound the ball from where it went out of bounds if it went out on the sideline. Yeah. Now, if you have this ball going out on the baseline, then you move the throw-in spot to 3 feet outside the nearest lane line on the baseline, and that's your spot for the throw-in. Yeah. So high IQ play, yes, for sure. In this situation, the only thing that would have made it even more high IQ is if she touches that ball right before it goes out of bounds, creating the backcourt violation, and then taking the ball all the way back. So that would have been interesting.
That is, I hadn't thought of that part of it. And real quick here from Ryan, anything from a positioning perspective, because they do kind of get caught. The official does kind of get caught on this play.
It's a little crowded down there. I mean, I like hanging back a little bit so you're not right there at the action, but you're still trying to keep an angle. But it's crowded. The ref can't do much on that. I think the ref at first possibly anticipated the touch right here, but once the ball started rolling back, you see him walking more briskly back there. Now he's getting to a position where he can see in between the matchup at all times. The only thing is we can't create the depth because the bench is right there. You'd like to be able to create depth. If this was rolling along the other sideline, you're going to have more depth to widen out to where you're not getting caught on top of a play, because you can't officiate from the floor up really well when you're on top of a play. And that's what you need to do on this play. So really, it's one of those where he maybe didn't even know he had the option to choose between foul and out of bounds. He just was always going to call out of bounds on this once it rolled out. And he didn't see the throw, kind of the slinging her to the side by the defender until the ball was already on the line. So he knew he was calling it out of bounds right there. So he's doing that. That's my perspective on that. Y'all let me know if you disagree.
Yeah, I agree, and it's a good comment from Damon here about the calmness, right? The official, you could see they, even in their body movement and their speed, they're not really um, overreacting to the situation.
Hey, is
But
that Damon Patterson, my guy that I stayed with at SEC camp this last weekend or this last summer?
it's Damon, yeah.
Nice, Damon. What's up, baby?
Well, this is good stuff. This has been a really fun conversation today. Court views, having Linnae here and really being able to flesh out these different perspectives of how players see the game versus officials and what we can all learn from each other. I mean, that's really, Milton, right? When we started this podcast, that was really the vision that we had for it, right?
Right. Yes, sir. That's it.
Yeah. Good stuff. Well, those of you out there listening to the Court Views podcast, we really appreciate it. We just ask you to share plays, continue to share with Milton, with us here at Ref Masters, spread the word and give us your feedback. Let us know what types of plays, what types of things, content you'd like to see more of in the future. And if maybe there's things you'd like to see a little bit less of, you can always let us know that as well. So final words here. Linnae, what was your big takeaway from today?
Honestly, my biggest takeaway was just understanding the game better and forming better relationships with the referees. I think this is my actual first conversation in depth, like on a personal note, really breaking down the game. And I think it was really good. I think more conversations like this can help, everyone involved in the game.
Agreed. That's really well said. Chip, final words on you. What was your takeaway today?
That was fantastic. I first got to say, Linnae, thank you so much for being on here. I love being able to get players' perspective. That's why I loved establishing a relationship and a friendship with Milt. That's why I love being able to talk to you on this. So you brought the heat today, and it was great stuff. I love it. My takeaway is very similar. It's the anytime we get a chance to step across the line to the other side and hear a different perspective, it can make us a more well-rounded individual and help us improve if our mindset is correct. Yeah. And so for me, it's like one of the things that I struggle with sometimes is, if I feel like I know more than somebody on a specific topic, you know what I mean? Sometimes I have to fight that human nature to feel like I need to teach them something, instead of just trying to have a conversation and get together and learn a different perspective and share stuff. And that's why I love that we're able to do this, because we get to hear the other side of things. And anytime that we can have conversations like this between refs and players, whether it's former players, current players, coaches, like that's always going to move the needle if we approach that conversation with, I want to learn something today. So that's why I love conversations like this. And again, Linnae, it was great to be able to talk to you today. I've got a ton of respect for you. I've loved watching you play, and it's great to be able to speak in person to you.
Thank you, Sam. Thank you.
Milton.
Speak so well, brother.
Milton, any final words from you, sir?
Nah, man, just another fun conversation. I appreciate you coming on, Linnae. I really respect your perspective. It helped me a lot because I'm a stickler when it comes to certain things, and I'm very how would you describe me, Chip?
I mean, you're thorough as well, just like me.
Yeah, I'm pretty thorough when it comes to basketball. I mean, I just like all the things that I've learned now, I wish I knew as a player. And I feel like I'm my best self at 35 now, when I feel like I would have been much better at 25 if I would have had the knowledge and the understanding. But yeah, no, I really appreciate your perspective, and you still playing right now?
Yeah. Yep. Still
Respect.
playing, yeah.
So.
Yeah.
And she's going to give a commitment to me right now, Linnae, that as soon as her playing days are over, she's going to become an official, because she would make a great referee.
For sure.
Honestly, you would.
In a couple of years.
Couple years, yeah.
Well, let's stay in contact for sure. We can start prepping you as you're still a player. It can only help you in your playing days. So then by the time you get done, you're like, all right, I'm ready to put the stripes on. Let's go.
Hey, easier for her to convert to an official than for Chip than for us to convert to being players, right? We have no hope in that whatsoever.
No lies detected. Those are straight facts right there, Sony. Straight facts.
Hey, everyone, again, thank you so much. If you're watching here live, if you're watching on the recording, we really appreciate it. On behalf of Linnae, Chip, Milton, I'm Sony. See you next time.
Thanks, guys.